Welcome back to the Pro Ticker Podcast, your Thursday morning edition covering major financial magazine headlines, everyone.
It is good to be here.
Yeah.
And honestly, looking at the sheer volume of news coming out of Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, and CNBC this morning,
Sure.
we have our work cut out for us.
We really do.
It's one of those days where the headlines don't just compete, they actively contradict each other.
It really feels that way. It is Thursday, February 12, 2026, and I feel like we're looking at two different worlds. On one side, you have this, utopian AI future where companies are making billions.
Seemingly overnight.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have a very messy, very human reality with trade wars, political mutinies, and a job market that, to be honest, I can't make heads or tails of.
You're highlighting the central tension of the day. We are seeing a two-speed world. You have the AI economy, which is moving at light speed, effectively decoupling from reality.
Right.
And then you have the traditional economy, manufacturing, shipping, labor that is getting bogged down in what looks like a constitutional crisis in Washington.
A constitutional crisis. That sounds like we're escalating quickly. Let's start right there. I was reading through the reports on Yahoo Finance and CNBC this morning, and my jaw hit the floor. We aren't just talking about politicians arguing. We're talking about a genuine rebellion within the House of Representatives regarding President Trump's trade policy.
It is so rare to see a rebuke this sharp from a president's own party, especially on a signature issue. To set the stage, the House voted 219 to 211 to disapprove of the president's tariffs on Canada.
Okay.
Now, typically you'd expect the Democrats to vote against tariffs. That's sort of standard operating procedure. But the math doesn't work unless Republicans cross the aisle.
And that's what shocked me. Yahoo Finance actually listed the defectors. We're seeing names like Thomas Massie.
Thomas Massie, Don Bacon, Kevin Kiley. These aren't people who usually vote together on, well, anything.
Not at all. You've got libertarians, moderates, conservatives, all jumping ship. What is going on here?
It's a convergence of different fears. For someone like Massie, it's a libertarian stance against taxation because tariffs are effectively taxes on consumers.
Sure.
For others, it's about their districts. If you represent a border state or a manufacturing hub that relies on Canadian lumber or aluminum, these tariffs aren't abstract policy. They're job killers.
Right.
But the deeper issue, and the one that CNBC highlighted, is the legal justification the president is using.
Right. The president is claiming this is about national security, specifically regarding fentanyl and drug precursors coming from Canada.
Correct. Because he's framing it as a national security emergency, he's bypassing the usual congressional approval for trade deals. He's using executive authority.
Okay.
That is why this vote matters. It's Congress trying to say, wait a minute, you can't just use emergency powers to rewrite the entire North American economy.
And the pushback from the White House was immediate and pretty aggressive. The president went on Truth Social and essentially threatened that these defectors would seriously suffer the consequences.
Which escalates this from a policy dispute to a power struggle. And here is where we need to get into the weeds a bit, because the Yahoo Finance report mentioned a specific piece of legislation that is at the heart of this, the IEEPA.
The International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. I saw that mentioned, but I'll be honest, my eyes glazed over a bit. Why is a law from 1977 suddenly the most important thing in Washington?
Because that act is the big red button for economic warfare. It was designed to let the president sanction rogue states like Iran or North Korea.
Okay.
It gives the executive branch immense power to freeze assets and block trade if there's an unusual and extraordinary threat. The controversy here is that the president is using this War Powers Act against Canada,
Our closest ally.
our closest ally, to handle a drug policy issue.
So the Supreme Court is going to have to decide. Can the president use war powers to set tariffs on maple syrup and lumber?
Essentially, yes. There is a ruling looming later this year. If the Supreme Court sides with the president, it means Congress has effectively lost control over trade policy forever. If they side with Congress, it cripples the president's economic agenda. This vote yesterday was the House signaling to the court, we do not consent to this. It is a massive constitutional gamble.
And while Washington is playing 4D chess with the Constitution, the actual economy is doing something equally confusing. I was looking at the data from CNBC and Bloomberg this morning regarding the labor market. The headline number was huge, right? 130,000 jobs added in January.
It was a blowout number. Dow Jones was only expecting 55,000. So on the surface, the American job machine is roaring back to life.
But then I started reading the analysis, and the tone wasn't celebratory at all. It was skeptical. Why is good news suddenly treated like a warning sign?
Because you have to look at the revisions. This is something government reports do. They release a headline number, and then a month later they quietly say, oops, we miscounted.
Right.
Bloomberg highlighted that while January was 130,000, December was revised down brutally. It went from a decent number down to just 48,000.
That is a massive drop.
It gets starker. If you look at the revisions for the entire year of 2025, the narrative changes completely. We spent all of last year thinking the economy was resilient. But the revised data shows that job growth in 2025 was, to quote Fed Governor Christopher Waller, zero, zip, nada.
Wait. So for a whole year, we basically treaded water and we didn't know it until now.
We were flying blind. And this creates a nightmare scenario for the Federal Reserve. Imagine you're the Fed. You kept interest rates high all through 2025 because you thought the economy was too hot.
Okay.
Now you find out the economy was actually flatlining. You might have accidentally strangled growth.
So they made a mistake. But now, in January 2026, jobs are booming again. Doesn't that sort of fix it?
It actually complicates it because now the Fed is seeing 130,000 new jobs and thinking, okay, if we cut rates now, we might overheat things again and cause inflation. The market was praying for a rate cut in June. This data probably pushes that dream back to July or even later.
That explains the market reaction. I saw gold slipped about 0.8%. Gold usually likes it when rates go down.
Right. Gold loves cheap money and chaos. High rates are bad for gold. But more importantly, look at the traders. They are trapped in this good news is bad news cycle.
Right.
A strong labor market means sticky inflation. Sticky inflation means high rates. And high rates mean it's harder for businesses to borrow and grow.
Which brings us back to that two-speed world idea. Because while the broader economy is fighting over interest rates, the AI sector seems to be operating with an unlimited budget. We have some major news from Bloomberg about the hardware that powers artificial intelligence.
The chip wars.
Yeah.
This is where the real money is moving.
Right.
And the story today is a redemption arc. Samsung Electronics.
I feel like for the last 2 years, every time we talked about AI chips, it was SK Hynix this and Micron that. Samsung was the big guy who somehow missed the boat.
They absolutely missed the initial wave. SK Hynix beat them to the punch on HBM high bandwidth memory. These are the specialized memory chips that sit right next to the NVIDIA processors. You can't run modern AI without them. Samsung was embarrassed. They were lagging on yield, lagging on performance.
But today's report says they are shipping HBM4.
That's the claim. And HBM4 isn't just a small upgrade, it's a generational leap. Without getting too bogged down in the engineering, HBM4 allows for vertical stacking directly on the logic die.
Okay.
It creates a much faster, much more energy-efficient pathway for data.
Yeah.
It is essential for NVIDIA's new Rubin platform.
Rubin being the successor to the Blackwell chips everyone was fighting over last year.
Exactly. The Vera Rubin architecture. If Samsung is saying we are shipping HBM4 to customers, and let's be real, customer is NVIDIA, it means they have solved their engineering bottleneck. Samsung CTO Jai Yuksong had a very confident quote about returning to their original state as the dominant force in memory.
It's amazing how quickly fortunes turn in this industry. 1 minute you're a relic, the next you're the kingmaker. Speaking of fortunes turning, we have to talk about SoftBank. This story from CNBC is just wild to me.
It is the ultimate high-stakes poker game. Masayoshi Son has been quiet for a while after the, WeWork debacle. But SoftBank just posted its first profit since 2021, $1.6 billion.
And it's not because their portfolio companies sold a lot of widgets. It's because of one specific bet.
OpenAI. SoftBank's stake in the creators of ChatGPT gained something like $17 billion in value just between April and December.
$17 billion.
It effectively saved their balance sheet.
But the part of the story that made me sweat, literally just reading it, was how they funded that bet. Bloomberg reported that to double down on OpenAI, SoftBank sold their entire stake in NVIDIA.
It's the kind of move that either makes you a legend or a cautionary tale in business school textbooks. Think about it. NVIDIA has been the single best performing asset of the decade.
Easily.
SoftBank looked at NVIDIA and said, we're cashing out. We think OpenAI is the better horse. ASI, artificial superintelligence. He believes we are close to AI that is 10,000 times smarter than a human.
Wow.
He thinks OpenAI gets there first. If he's right, selling NVIDIA won't matter because OpenAI will be worth trillions. If he's wrong, well, he sold the most valuable semiconductor company in history to buy a lottery ticket.
They talk about conviction. But while SoftBank is betting the farm, another tech giant is struggling to even get out of the gate. Bloomberg had a brutal report on Apple today.
Brutal is the right word. If you own an iPhone, you've been hearing promises about a smarter Siri for years. The Apple Intelligence era.
Right.
It was supposed to arrive with iOS 26.4 in March.
Yeah, no.
Now reports from inside the testing groups say it is a mess. The new architecture, which they call Linwood, is failing.
When you say failing, do you mean it's just slow? Or is it broken?
It's both. The Linwood system is supposed to process complex requests on device to protect your privacy. But it's sluggish, it hangs, and here's the most damaging part. When it fails, it has to fall back to the ChatGPT integration.
That is humiliating. The whole selling point of Apple is we do it better and we do it privately. If Siri just shrugs and passes my request to open AI anyway, why do I need Apple's AI?
That is the question investors are asking. It breaks the privacy-first branding. If the phone is constantly phoning home to OpenAI because its own brain is too slow, that's a product failure.
Right.
Bloomberg suggests this could push the release to May or even September with iOS 27.
And meanwhile, Tim Cook is on stage promising entirely new classes of products. It feels like a disconnect. You have Samsung and SoftBank accelerating, and Apple, the most valuable company in the world, is tripping over its own shoelaces.
It reinforces that two-speed theme. Being an incumbent with billions of users actually makes it harder to pivot. You can't ship a beta product to a billion iPhones. It has to work. Apple is finding out that AI is messy, and their perfectionism is becoming a liability in a race that rewards speed.
I want to pivot from software back to hardware, but not chips. Cars. We have this ongoing narrative that Chinese EVs are going to take over the world. They're cheap, they're high-tech, and they're everywhere in Europe. But I haven't seen a single one on a U.S. highway. CNBC interviewed Brian DeBoer, the CEO of Lithium Motors, to find out why.
And his answer was fascinating because it wasn't about politics. You'd assume the reason you can't buy a BYD or a Chery in America is because of tariffs or, Biden-Trump trade wars.
Right, that's what I thought.
But DeBoer says the real wall is much more boring. Franchise loss.
This is the dealership system, right?
Right. In the UK, Lithium Motors sells Chinese cars. It's easy. DeBoer mentioned that to add a Chinese brand to a UK showroom, it costs less than $100,000. You just put the cars on the floor next to the Fords or the Peugeots.
And in the U.S.?
In the U.S., state franchise laws are incredibly protective of existing dealers. You often cannot house competing brands under the same roof in the same way. You need a separate facility, separate service bays, separate signage.
So it's way more expensive.
The cost isn't $100,000. It's millions.
So even if the tariffs were zero, we still wouldn't see these cars because it's too expensive to build the buildings to sell them.
Exactly. The barrier to entry isn't just the price of the car. It's the price of the real estate and the bureaucracy. DeBoer is saying that unless Chinese manufacturers want to spend billions building their own dealership networks from scratch, they are locked out.
It's a structural moat.
A structural moat that protects the U.S. auto market more effectively than any tariff.
That is such a crucial detail that gets lost in the political shouting matches. Let's zoom out for a quick global snapshot before we wrap up. We touched on Canada, but what about the rest of the world? CNBC had some data on the UK economy.
The UK is wheezing. That's the best way to put it. GDP grew 0.1% in December.
0.1%. That's basically a rounding error.
It's growth, technically, but it's lackluster. The service sector was flat. Manufacturing ticked up slightly. The UK is avoiding recession, but it lacks the dynamism we are seeing elsewhere. It's just treading water.
Contrast that with Japan, where the market is actually rallying.
But notice why it's rallying. It's the Takaichi trade. Prime Minister Sana Takaichi just won a landslide victory.
Is she that popular with the business class?
She is a fiscal hawk who is also pro-stimulus in specific strategic sectors. The market loves stability. And her landslide victory signals that Japan is going to have a very unified government for the next few years.
Got it.
In a world where the U.S. is fracturing and Europe is stagnant, Japan looking boring and stable is actually a massive buy signal for global investors.
It's funny how boring becomes a premium asset in a chaotic market.
It absolutely does.
So let's try to tie all these threads together. We have a U.S. government fighting a constitutional battle over trade. We have a labor market that is confusing the smartest economists at the Fed. And we have an AI revolution that is picking winners and losers with brutal efficiency.
If there is one takeaway for the listener today, it's that the economy isn't one thing anymore. You can't just look at the S&P 500 and say things are good.
Because the S&P might be driven by SoftBank and Samsung while the company down the street is dealing with tariff shocks.
Precisely. We are in a moment of extreme divergence. If you are in the AI capital flow, you are experiencing a boom. If you are in the traditional economy, like the auto dealers or manufacturers relying on Canadian imports, you are facing headwinds from interest rates and political uncertainty.
And the risk is that the stock market is only looking at the shiny AI object and ignoring the political cracks forming in the foundation.
That is the danger. Markets are terrible at pricing political risk until it's too late. They are ignoring the House vote and the tariff threats because NVIDIA and SoftBank are making money.
Mm-hmm.
But if that Supreme Court ruling goes the wrong way, or if the jobs data forces the Fed to hold rates high through 2026, that optimism could evaporate very, very quickly.
It's a lot to mull over. Are we in a boom, or are we just ignoring the bust?
That is the question everyone needs to ask themselves today.
We'll see you all tomorrow morning with new headlines from major financial magazines.